welcome to the Maria Show. Today I'm going to be reviewing The School for Good and Evil, The Last Ever After. This is the third book in the series. I'm really sorry that my last video was so long. I'm gonna try to make this one shorter. So first off, as always, I'm going to be starting with a brief overview of everything that happened in the book, and then I'm going to be sharing my thoughts and critiques of the book. If you want to just skip to that, I'll leave the timestamp for it in the description and also in the comments. I thought that I would finish this book much sooner. This one took me about like 3 weeks, and I probably could have done it in a week, but I was just taking my time with this one because I was still processing everything that happened in the second book. I was scarred emotionally, spiritually. I was going through it, okay? Because the last book had my girl Sophie feeling like nobody loved her. She was just so broken. She went off with the schoolmaster thinking that he's her true love. So the book is set, I think it's like 3 weeks after the events of the second book. So Tedros and Agatha are in the reader world because they got transport there in the last chapter of the second book. And Sophie is with the schoolmaster. Schoolmaster has Sophie trapped in his tower. He asks her to marry him basically every day, and that's like the only social interaction that they have. Sophie keeps refusing his ring because she's having doubts if he's actually her true love or not, and if she really wants to marry the guy. She's also a little uncomfortable about the whole like age thing because this dude is like 2,000 years old and he wants to marry a 16-year-old. And so, understandably, Sophie's kind of like uncomfortable with that, even though he looks young, he looks like a teenager. If one of the author's messages in this book is showing girls different types of toxic relationships, he really nailed it, because the schoolmaster, or Raphael apparently, is a narcissistic abuser, literally. He is constantly gaslighting and manipulating Sophie. Every time she's expressing her concerns about their relationship or not being sure if he's her true love or not, he always knows exactly what to say and how to reel her back in. Sophie's fear is that she's going to end up alone, that no one loves her. So anytime that she's having doubt, he just picks at that. He's like, you know, I'm the only one who loves you, right? Like, you know, you're gonna be alone, right? And it's awful, and I want him away from my girl Sophie, okay? And then there's Tedros and Agatha stuck in the reader world. They need relationship counseling. They are constantly arguing and fighting. So that's the state of our characters in the beginning of this book. But anyway, after constantly asking Sophie day after day, Sophie finally concedes and she says yes, and they're engaged now. By the way, also, just like in the last book when it was the School for Good and Evil changed to the School for Boys and the School for Girls, the schools have now changed to the School for New and the School for Old. In the old school, basically, the schoolmaster has brought back to life all of the old fairy tale villains. They're zombies now, and they are being taught by him in the School for Old. And the schoolmaster's goal is basically to rewrite all of the fairy tales so that they all have evil winning in all of them. So Tedros and Agatha's goal is to save Sophie and have her destroy the ring. They learned that the ring is what is keeping the schoolmaster alive and young. So after a long thing of chapters of them fighting fairy tale zombies and trying to rescue Sophie, they finally get to her and they take her from the schoolmaster. That's the end of part 1. Now we get into part 2. And now Hort, Tedros, and Agatha and Sophie have to find a safe house, and Merlin takes them to one. And the safe house turns out to be Sir Lancelot and Guinevere's home. Guinevere being Tedros's mother. And there's obviously a ton of drama surrounding that because Tedros has some mommy issues, some family issues, and so it's just chaos. On top of that, now we have Sophie will not destroy the ring. It turns out that the ring that Sophie is wearing is made of black swan gold. And the gold is basically manipulating her and making her believe that it knows her ever after and that it can give her her ever after. And it basically always leads whoever's wearing the ring towards evil. Fast forward, basically, Sophie goes back to the schoolmaster because she's still wearing the ring. And that's the end of part 2. So then we get into part 3, obviously, and Sophie and the schoolmaster have their evil wedding. Fast forward some more, it turns out Sophie and Agatha are twin sisters, which I'm really mad that I got spoiled for that. I actually knew that was gonna happen because I read a comment somewhere, and I feel like I would have had so much more impact on me if I wouldn't have known. Yeah, that was a twist. Fast forward some more. Sophie is about to kill Tedros, Agatha, and her dad. The schoolmaster thinks that if Sophie kills her own blood, that will reverse the effects that him killing his own brother had. So right when she's about to kill all of them, the ring slips off, she immediately goes and destroys it, and the schoolmaster withers away into ash because he's old. The book ends with Tedros and Agatha going away to Camelot because Tedros will be crowned king soon, taking Agatha as his queen. And Sophie becomes the Dean of Evil because Lady Lasso was sadly killed in this book. And she gave her her uniform before she died. So now to get into my thoughts. I think that the cover design for this one is kind of growing onto me. I know that I've said in the last few reviews that I don't like that they changed the design, but it's growing on me a little bit. I really liked part 1 of the book. I was very engaged. I really liked it. Surprisingly, I liked what the author did with Tedros in this book. I liked that we were able to explore more of his backstory and his internal conflict and sort of flesh the character out and actually give him a personality, finally. I still don't like him, but he was just slightly more bearable in this one. I really liked the whole conflict with Tedros and his mother in this book. I'm really glad that they were able to come together and form a relationship and that they were able to have a conversation about what happened. I was honestly rooting for them, and I never thought that I would be rooting for anything involving Tedros, but here we are. Speaking of Tedros, I really loved the Tedros hate in this book. I loved that Hort hated Tedros. He literally said everything that I have been thinking. I love Hort so much. I love that he hates Tedros. I liked that running gag in the book where in the beginning Tedros was like making fun of Agatha, that she's like fainted and stuff, and they're like, oh, she's such like a princess, and then like he just like keeps fainting throughout the book, and it's really funny. And then at the end when Agatha says, oh god, Tedros, I think I'm gonna faint, and then he's like, you catch me, I'll catch you. And you know what? We love character development. Good job. I think that the twist with Sophie and Agatha being twin sisters was written very well. I feel like if I was reading it without the knowledge that that was the case, that I would be like, oh my goodness, what? Like, so it would have like the twist reaction. I really wish I would have experienced that. I really liked the exploration of their families, a fairy tale, and I think that was very well done. I kind of want them to have a book because it seemed very interesting. So now to get into some things that I didn't like about the book. So this is something that I haven't liked since the first book. I have a lot of moments when I'm reading this series where I'm like, you can put that in a kid's book? What? Yeah, there's a lot of sexual and like violence in this book particularly. For example, there's this one part in the book where Sophie is wearing a crop top and a mini skirt. And now, don't get me wrong, like if a 16-year-old girl wore something like that in this world, like that would be fine, right? Or like even if it was in like a teen young adult book, like that would be fine. Like it's not always a sexual thing that girls wear that stuff, right? But in this book, it is explicitly done as a sexual thing. And it's that fact, that context, and this being a middle school grade book, where on the back of this book it says that it's for ages 8 and up, reading that stuff just makes me kind of uncomfortable. That's just one example of other things that I saw in this book that were inappropriate. There was also a lot of graphic depictions of some violence in this book, like the schoolmaster being literally chopped in the head with a sword. Cinderella was like axed. Lady Lasso was stabbed. I think there was this description of all the 7 dwarves. I think they had their eyes scratched out, and then Snow White was like there, like all bloody, and she was dead, and like just like things like that. That again, if this was a teen or a young adult book, like that's fine. But it's the fact that this is a book that says that it's for 8-year-olds and up that makes me uncomfortable. Really don't know why the author decided this was okay for a middle school grade book. I really don't know why he decided to make it for middle schoolers. Also, like the whole thing with the schoolmaster being like 6,000 years old and wanting to marry a 16-year-old, and Sophie being like uncomfortable. Like the first line of the book is, "It is natural to doubt your true love when you do not know if he is young or old." Yeah, it is. That would be very concerning. So yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's just like, so why is this a kid book? Like, why is this a kid's book? I don't understand. Why was this necessary? You know?
That little girl is a child. I don't want to see you sniffing around her anymore this afternoon. Do you understand?
Yes,
Boy, have you lost.
Another critique I have of the book is I feel like the characters' relationships are always talked about as something that happens off screen or in between the books. Like even in the first book with Sophie and Agatha, you know, they were supposed to be best friends, and then when they started, you know, coming apart and they were like, we used to be best friends, we used to be so close. But it was like, well, we never saw that. Like it just seemed like in the book, it seemed like Sophie just saw Agatha as her good deed, and that was it. Like their friendship wasn't genuine. Or even in this book, like Agatha literally decided that Tedros was her true love, like the last chapter of the book, just like that. And then the second book, she was all hell-bent on him. She like was just like, I just know in my heart that he's supposed to be my ever after and I must fight for him to the death and all this stuff. And they weren't barely together throughout that whole book. They were separated again. And then in the third book is the first time that they're ever really like spending a lot of time together, and they're constantly fighting, they're constantly arguing, and then they have a moment in the book, they're like, what happened to us? What do you mean what happened to you guys? This is the first time you guys are even like spending quality time together. Like, what do you mean? I just feel like in the first book, like if the author had established like Sophie and Agatha's relationship and that like had some actual like friendship moments, that the conflicts that happened in that book, or if Sophie actually did fall in love with Tedros and they had relationship moments, and then it seemed like Agatha was falling in love with Tedros and they realized that they loved each other. Like, just like the conflicts would just mean so much more in the book. And like throughout the entire series, the stuff that goes down would have so much more impact on the reader and the characters. I just feel like it would have been so much better. Like I said, in the first part of the book, I was very engaged. Like, I feel like that could have been a book by itself. Very engaged in that, and I really like that. And but by the time it went to the second half, I was really forcing myself to read it. Maybe it's just because of my ADHD, but I just felt like stuff was dragging on. This is a thick book, and I feel like the author could have really skinnied it down, you know? Just like how I said in the first book, I just felt like there was a lot of unnecessary stuff that I felt like just should not have been in the book. I felt like he could have just had the first part okay, and then the pivotal parts of the second and third parts, and then that be the book. And I feel like I would have been more engaged, but it was just dragging on a lot. I'm gonna be honest, I was skimming through the last chapters of the book. Like, okay, yeah, okay, is there anything important in here? Anything at all? Anything that I need to know? Okay, no. Next chapter. And I just kept doing that until the end. Opposite of how the second book was, I felt like I was very engaged. I think the second book is my favorite in the series so far. The way that he wrote the endings of those last chapters was very good, and I really wish that he would have done that in this one. So now to get into my, other thoughts on the book, what I thought the meaning of the book was. So just like how the last book was the school for girls and the school for boys, and that was about, the conflicts between the two, this one was the school for old and the school for new. I think that represented the fighting between the old story and the new story. It was sort of about like breaking generational chains, curses, if you will, because it's shown in the book that Sophie and Agatha, their parents' story was very similar to theirs. The lesson was sort of like, don't have your story end like theirs did. You have the chance to change it. You know how this ends. Change it now. So it's sort of about not repeating family, mistakes and decisions. And that like you have the power to change how your story ends. Like the past doesn't control the present. Another message I saw in the book is basically don't follow your heart, because hearts just change and throw you left and right. Because in the second book, literally, Agatha's heart, she was like, I just know in my heart I'm supposed to be with Tedros. And then in this book, she's like having doubts about becoming Tedros's queen and all of that, and she doesn't know she was ready for that or she wants that. And then she's like, oh, but in my heart, like, my heart says that I won't be Tedros's queen. So am I not Tedros's? Is he not my true love? Like, their hearts are literally just like constantly changing, and they're just running after their feelings. And Sophie is like, oh, I know in my heart Tedros is my true love. She's being manipulated by the ring, but you know. And then she's thinking that Raphael is, and all this stuff. And I kind of took to that, like, don't always trust your heart, because it goes everywhere. I think there's times in life where you need to use your head, and there's also times where you need to use your heart. You sort of have to discern between the two. Like, for example, like if you're in a job that you're not happy with and you can leave, well then leave your job, because you're not going to be happy if you don't. And then there's situations where you're maybe in like a toxic relationship and you're like, no, but in my heart, like, I love this guy and he loves me. It's like, those are situations where you have to like use your brain and your common sense and put your heart, like, just throw your heart away and just use your brain and be like, okay, yeah, this guy isn't good for me, I'm a head out. So like I said, like, you sort of have to discern between the two. So breaking generational cycles and not always following your heart and sometimes using common sense is kind of the messaging I saw in the book. Also, I think I kind of understand where the author is going within this story and like what the overall messages is. It's kind of like in life, like you're always trying to figure out like how your story ends, like what you want to do in life. Like, okay, I want to be with this guy, I want to have this career, I want to go here, and then like, oh, I can't be with this guy, I want to focus on this career, but oh wait, maybe I can do it together, oh, but what I kind of want to go here. It's sort of like you change your mind and like you can decide how your story ends. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, it seems like they're all just trying to figure out their place in life and what they're supposed to do and what their happily ever after really is. And I still don't think that they have it, and I hope they don't, because I do not like where Sophie's story ended. Sophie is supposed to be with Hort, okay? Agatha and Hort saw it in the vision. They know that Agatha and Tedros are supposed to be together, and Hort and Sophie is going to be together. That's their ending. That's their true ending. We did not get that in this book. It's apparently going to take another 3 books because there's 6 books in this godforsaken series. But yeah, like, poor Hort. I did not like that. Like, he was literally like, maybe your prince is just around the corner. And then Sophie just turns to him and is like, I don't need men anymore. And he's just like, what? Dude has literally loved her since the first book, and she just constantly rejects him. It's so sad. I'm really glad that Sophie realized that she doesn't need a man anymore, but I'm really hoping that Hort and Sophie at least go on a date in the 4th book, or have some moments, you know? So I think that's all I had to say. If you have any thoughts on the book that you want to share, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please thumbs it up so I know. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. I might take a break from this series for a while. I'm still not sure. But that's it for now. Bye.